Hello and welcome to this episode of Recitals. We'll be discussing social issues for the month of August. The themes we're covering today will be health, women's rights, and literacy. These are the topics we're discussing today. We'll start with Himachal Bill raises women's marriage age. What has happened is Himachal Pradesh has passed an amendment to the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, and this amendment has effectively raised the age of marriageable age for women from 18 to 21. So let's get into this and let's see the details. Now, Himachal Pradesh Assembly has passed an amendment which is called the Prohibition of Child Marriages Himachal Pradesh Amendment Bill 2024. Now, the bill proposes that the marriage age at women, the age at which women will be allowed to get married, be increased from 18 to 21 years of age. Now, right now, across the country, men are allowed to get married at 21 years of age and women are allowed to get married at the age of 18. Now, what this bill is effectively doing is bringing both the marriageable age of men and women at par. So, both women and men can get married only at 21. But there is a problem with this, or rather it involves a certain set of legalities. There are a few issues involved, so let us try and understand that. Now, currently what happens is, currently in our legal system, marriage is in the concurrent list, which means that both the states and the government and the center can legislate on that. And when there is a conflict between the law legislated by the center and a law legislated by the state, then there is also an act that will decide that. So we'll discuss all of this as we move on. Now, what the bill has done is, like I said, bill has raised the minimum age from 18 to 21. Okay. Now, this brings it in conflict with the act, the Majority Act of 1875, which says that the age at which people attain majority in the country, and that has a lot of legal complications. For example, if somebody is to be tried as a juvenile, they cannot be tried except as defined by the law. So similarly, there are rights and responsibilities that go with this, and this defines the age of attaining majority at 18 years. Okay. Now, this difference also has consequences for several aspects of social life. That also we'll be covering. Now, there is also an inconsistency between the minimum age of marriage allowed under various Supreme Court judgments. For example, in 2018, the Supreme Court said that the right to marry is part of the right to life. So, right to marry and right to life are basically given together to the citizens. And this is under Article 21 of the Constitution. So basically, this is a fundamental right. Now, in another case, in 2018, the court said that when two adults consensually choose to get married, they have the right to choose life partners as a matter of right. Now, the right to marry is part of the right to life. And in 2018, the Supreme Court said the same thing. Okay, now the choice to get married is protected under Articles 21 and Articles 19. Hence, it raises questions about the reasonableness of the restriction when the age of marriage has been raised from 18 to 21. Now, there are laws, there are conditions under which there can be restrictions placed on fundamental rights. Now, there are three conditions under which have to be met before there can be restrictions placed on fundamental rights. First one is there should be a public purpose. Second is the restriction must have a nexus between the purpose and the law that has been made. These two must be together. And the third is there must not be any other less intrusive way of attaining that purpose. So these three conditions must be met for a restriction like this to be placed on the right to marriage when we are raising the right to marriage from 18 to 21. Now, what are the implementation challenges when we come to this idea? There have been limited success in curbing the marriage under the age of 18. For example, in 2020, only 785 cases in the entire country have been booked for underage marriages. An entire year, only 785 cases. So it's a very small number. Now, this raises the question as to whether raising the age of marriage for children, for girls, will actually be effective. Now, let us look at the legislative processes and the implications. Like I said, since marriage is a concurrent subject, both the center and state can legislate on that. However, like I said, when the state law contradicts a central law, there is a provision. There is Article 254 that comes into play. We have Article 254(1) that comes into play. Article 254(1) comes into play, and what this says is that the conflicting part of the state law will be rendered ineffective unless under Article 254 Section 2, it can gain the assent of the President. So it needs the President's consideration. So similarly, when we had the Uttaranchal passed the Uniform Civil Code, in March this year, March 2024, the President gave the assent. So a similar procedure will be required for this particular bill. So there is a provision under the Constitution wherein we can actually handle a case like this. Now, what is the debate surrounding this issue? When we look at it, these are the major things. There is a question of gender equality and education. Since women and men must be treated equally, it's only natural that both of them have the same age of marriage. Now, the second thing is, if women have more time to get educated, if the minimum age has been raised and they are not allowed to get married, they have a better chance of a higher education and actually getting a better life for themselves. That is one issue. So basically, this allows women to get empowered. They can gain life skills, their own economic position can improve. That is one thing. The other thing is health and well-being. Now, when people get married early, what happens is that their chances of actually conceiving, their conceivements become difficult, their childbearing their pregnancies become difficult, and also it's necessary that the emotional well-being of people be considered. So what will happen is when we raise the marriage age to 21, people also gain a little more mental maturity. So that is the other thing. Now, when child birth is delayed by a couple of years, it also means that the woman can actually have a say in what they want to do with their lives, whether number of children she wants to have, what she wants to do. Because having a girl married off very young to a man who's older than her creates an imbalance in the marriages. So this can be handled through this. This is one thing. The other thing is, it leads to several issues, like when a girl is young, there can be greater chances of domestic abuse and things like that. So that can be handled. Now, the most important point is economic development, workers' participation. We have seen that women's worker participation, what is called labor participation of women, the rates have been falling. That's also a function of the present economic developmental cycle where we are going in. It has been observed around the world that as more people join, as a country becomes better in terms of its economy, as the economy progresses, as people attain a better status in life, they are less willing to send their women to work because they think that it's a question of social status. So this is a worldwide well-considered position. But besides that, fact remains that if women have more skills, they can participate better, and those skills can be gained only if they have time to gain skills before getting married. Very rarely do women get the chance to gain skills after marriage. That was the basic issue. Now we have to see where this goes now. The bill has to be approved by the governor, and after that it has to be approved by it has to gain the president's assent so that the state can actually implement this bill. And of course, as always, the bill will be applicable only to the state of Himachal Pradesh. The topic we are going to discuss now is Rule 170 of the Drugs Act. Now, what is Rule 170? What is the Drugs Act actually? Why is it relevant? Why is it in the news? Let us get into this. Now, first let us try and understand the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940. Now, this is an act that basically deals with import, production and distribution of drugs in the country. So, any drug that's either imported, made in the country or distributed is covered by this law. And also the cosmetics. Now, the other thing is these rules provide for classification of medications into schedules and instructions for their storage, their sale and everything. So, what are the key provisions of this act? One is licensing. The act mandates that all drug cosmetic manufacturers and sellers must obtain licenses from the relevant authorities, what are called drug control authorities. That's the most important one. The second one is standards and testing. So that is where we have specific standards for specific drugs. Those are to be met by the companies. And after that, there is also an approval process. Only approved drugs can be sold in the country. Now, there is also a question of regulation of advertisements. And this is where the issue comes today. The Rule 170 is about regulation of advertisements. Now, the other thing is there are also penalties for violations and all. So, this is more or less in crux what the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940 covers. Now, coming to the current Rule 170, why is it in the news? Why was Rule 170 introduced? To answer that, there was a discussion in the Parliament in 2012. And the Parliamentary Standing Committee basically came up with the idea that we need a set of rules and regulations to handle the advertisements that are coming out from Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha. So they thought the Parliament felt, or the Standing Committee felt that these are not covered adequately and there are a lot of false advertisements going on. And as a response to that, over a period of time, there were discussions and then Rule 170 was introduced. Now, the rule is basically aimed at Ayurvedic, Siddha and Unani drugs, and it's about how they can be advertised, how and what kind of permissions they need to get. So, that is what it was about. Now, why is this in the news right now? What happened was during the pandemic, Patanjali medicines, the company that's run by Ramdev and his people, they came out with a set of advertisements and they made some wild claims that had to be pulled back. Like they started making wild claims that they can cure a variety of diseases, they can cure a variety of ailments, and that's where. And they also started to put down allopathic medical practices. And the allopathic medical practices that are covered by IMA, they took Patanjali to the courts, and there the issue went out of control. And that's where the problem started. Now, there was an IMA's petition against Ramdev, his controversial statements basically. And then there was the notification was basically said that this is a violation of Article 170. And the issue is still in the courts. Now, what happened was that after the case, there was a contempt case against Patanjali Ayurvedic Limited. In 2024, the advertisers were told that they should they should submit self-declaration saying that we will not carry out these advertisements and everything. However, what happened was that July 1st, 2024, the ministry came out with a notification that said that the Rule 170 is no longer valid. So they basically said that Rule 170 was omitted. Through basically a notification on 1st July. 2024. So while there was a case going on, while there was a this case has been on for a little while now, and there have been a lot of judgment. There have been a lot of to and fro between the courts and the company in question. Patanjali was asked to actually apologize. They came out with an apology. Courts were not happy with the apology. Then it's been going on for a while. While this was on, the Rule 170 was omitted through a notification in the Indian Gazette. And that is, basically the government said that this is already covered by a variety of rules, and there's been an amendment to another act called the Magic Prevention Act, and that's why Rule 170 is no longer valid. Now, in 2018, like I said, the Rule 170 was introduced, and basically what happened was every product before approval, before advertising, they had to get a unique identification number by the state licensing authority. Now, that basically was to ensure that manufacturer had to submit detailed information including textual references, rationale, safety, effectiveness, and quality of the drugs. Now, this is something important. In the case of Ayurveda, Unani, and Siddha medicines, as you know, in the case of normal allopathic medicines, there are trials, there are clinical trials, then there is human testing. There's a whole lot of processes that are put into place to ensure that the medicines are actually effective and they meet this norms and standards. However, in the case of Ayurveda, Unani, and Siddha, what is required is that the textual references, there should be textual references, there should be a rationale for this, and then there have to be safety procedures, and there is also effectiveness. But the most basic criteria for Ayush products, Ayurveda, Unani, and Siddha, is textual references. These, if they are in place, they are actually allowed to make a product. Now, the rule mandates a certain rule. We are still talking about Rule 170. The rule still mandates that an application where people had to apply for a unique identification number, they had to give their contact details. If the contact details are missing, the application could be rejected. The advertisement could not be either obscene or vulgar. It could not promote sexual enhancement claims. It could not have anything like that. It could not feature celebrities or government officials. And it cannot reference government organizations or make false and exaggeration claims. Now, this is an interesting point. Let me just... Now, this one is an important point, celebrities and government officials, because in advertising, there is a principle called appeal to authority. Which basically means that if a famous person is saying, or if a person in government is saying something, we tend to take that more seriously. We tend to give it greater legitimacy and credibility. For that reason, they are not allowed to use celebrities or government officials for actually promoting their products. Now, the Ministry of Ayush, when they first came, while they were tackling with this problem, what they first did was, they said that they signed a MOU with the Advertising Standards Council of India for a period of 2 years. And the Department of Consumer Affairs set up an online system called Grievances Against Misleading Advertisements portal for registering public complaints against Ayurvedic, Unani, and Siddha products, Ayush products. Now, the ASCI, which is the Advertising Standards Council of India, they received quite a few complaints actually. Now, there were 732 cases of misleading advertisements in 2017 and 18, and 497 cases in 2018 and 19. So it is not like everything was fine. There were people actually complaining against these products and the claims they were making. Now, the other thing that happened was there were also pharmacovigilance centers that were set up by the country. There were centers for Ayurvedic, Siddha and Unani and homeopathy drug centers. They were basically set up in several parts of the country, and there were 1127 cases of misleading advertisements from August 2000 to March 2019. Now, March 2019, what the producers or the manufacturers of these products they did was, they went to the courts and they had Rule 170 suspended through a stay that was brought against it. Basically, the Delhi High Court said that there has not been enough, they basically gave a stay on this. Now, what are the challenges when we try to regulate Ayush drugs? Under the Drug Control Authority, manufacturers of Ayush drugs, they must obtain a license from the drug controller. However, like I said, unlike allopathic drugs, which require extensive trials, and then there is animal testing, there is human testing, then there are extensive trials, there is a control group, there is a non-control group, experimental group, all that happens. There is no such thing for Ayush products. Drugs can be approved based on the ratio provided on authoritative text. If you have a text, say, that is 500 years old or 1000 years old, and that says that these combinations together can cure something, that is good enough. However, safety trials are required only for formulations that have, there are a list of 60 ingredients basically. If there are 60 specific ingredients, if any of these 60 specific ingredients are used in a product, then the trials are required. Otherwise, if they don't use any of those 60, what are the, for example, snake venom. Some of the examples of the products, if they're used in any quantity in an Ayush product, in Ayurveda, Unani or Siddha, some of these are like snake venom. If snake venom is used in any quantity, then they need trials. Snake venom, then there is mercury, then there is arsenic. Now, these are just a few examples. There are a total of 60 compounds that are basically on the list that require trials. Now, this is an interesting thing. These two things, mercury and arsenic, are strictly prohibited according to allopathic medical practices. In fact, allopathic medical practices, whenever they basically criticize Ayurveda or the traditional medicines, they say that these two cannot be consumed by human beings because they're actually poisonous in some way. In fact, arsenic is poisonous. Arsenic can actually kill a person. Similarly, mercury, we're always trying to see if mercury is present in water, mercury is present in food, or has it leached into the ecosystem through our pollution, and has it come and re-entered the food cycles. We all hear about that. This particular food product now has mercury. Now, that is where this becomes a point of contention, where Ayurveda and Unani and Siddha say that we can use this for curing people, whereas allopathy says that if you consume these things, it can lead to death. So that is one of the standard criticisms against Ayurveda and other traditional practices. If these products or compounds are used, they need trials. And the other thing is, there also has to be an effectiveness test. There has to be a proof of effectiveness. Now, where does this issue stand right now? Like I said, on July 1st, 2024, the government came out with a notification saying that, Rule 174 is omitted, it's no longer valid. However, on 27th August 2024, that's I think about 15 days ago, the Supreme Court was hearing again the same case, Patanjali versus IMA, and they came down very heavily on the government. And they said that you cannot omit Rule 170, it continues to be there. So Rule 170 was omitted. However, it has been brought back by the courts, and right now it is still in effect. So that is where it is. And the problem of, there is a fundamental problem when we talk about traditional medicines, because the government has tried to, or rather has put in place an entire ecosystem to ensure that they are basically more scientific, and they are to the same standards as allopathic medicines. In fact, we had a detailed discussion about this in one of our previous videos. You can check that if you feel like. However, there are a lot of lacunae, because when we are saying textual references are enough, or only 60 compounds and 60 elements if they're there, then only trials are needed. We are actually creating a sort of a contentious situation where we really don't know how it is. However, it's not always the case. There are many medical manufacturers, medical companies who are involved in Ayurveda and all, and they actually carry out clinical trials. The current government position has been that it has to be verifiable. It must be scientific and verifiable, and we have been trying to actually promote. In fact, when we had the Gujarat summit, one of the things we said we'll promote was traditional medicine based on scientific trials and actually verifiability. Now, let us discuss polio vaccine triggered an infection in a child in Meghalaya. Let us discuss that now. Now, what is polio? How many types of polio are there? What are the vaccines that are used for polio? Who invented the vaccine? These are the kind of things that can end up as questions in prelims. So let us get into that and also see how actually are we still polio free as a country now that there is a case. Let us try and understand this issue. Now, poliomyelitis is a highly infectious viral disease. This is extremely infectious as a disease, and it can spread through contamination of water, food and all. And there are 3 types of polio. Let us see that. In 2014, India was officially declared polio free. However, now we have a case. So how does it affect us? Now, poliomyelitis or polio is a highly infectious disease caused by the poliomyelitis virus, and it is transmitted through fecal oral route. Typically, what happens is when we ingest food, contaminated water or food, it is highly contagious, and that is how it enters a person's system, and then it can lead to a variety of problems, and in some cases it can lead to paralysis, as we know quite well. Now, what are the symptoms of polio? They are fatigue, fever, headache, diarrhea, constipation, neck ache, throat ache, headache, tingling sensation and things like that. And the thing is, even though there are 3 types of polio viruses, there is wild polio virus 1, wild polio virus type 2, and there is wild polio virus type 3. Their symptoms are largely similar. Now, these 3, in terms of their symptoms, they are similar, but it means that we need 3 types of vaccines when we deal with them. Now, first, polio was recognized as a distinct condition by Michael Underwood in 1789. He is the first person to say that this is actually a distinct condition. That was in 1789. The virus was first identified in 1909 by Carl Landstein and Erwin Popper. So please remember these names. These are the kind of things that might end up sometime or the other in prelims. Now, the word itself was first used in 1874 by Adolf Kussmaul. He's a German physician, and he was the first one to use this word. Now, as of now, only Pakistan and Afghanistan, as of 2023, only Pakistan and Afghanistan have not been declared polio free. Every other part of the world is polio free. Only these 2 countries, they still have what is called a wild polio virus. Now, there are two basic patterns of the polio virus illness that have been described. One is a minor illness that does not involve the central nervous system, called abortive poliomyelitis. The first category is called abortive poliomyelitis. That is one pattern. And then there is a second one. This does not involve the central nervous system. Then there is a second one which can lead to paralytic attacks. It can lead to paralysis. Basically, so what we have is there can be a paralytic kind of illness, and there can also be non-paralytic kind of illness. Now, adults are more likely to develop symptoms that involve paralysis than children. Now, the most important thing that we need to remember about polio is that it does not have a cure. It can only be prevented. Once somebody gets polio, it cannot be cured. That's the reason we see so many people suffering with polio who actually have wasted limbs and things like that. Now, let us look at the life cycle of this and how it actually happens. Now, the first thing is the virus enters through the mouth, typically in contaminated food or water, and this is where it is dangerous. Now, it basically affects the spinal cord. Okay, the virus first infects and replicates in the intestine cells. So, even though it is entering, it's basically in the intestine cells that it basically replicates. It enters through the mouth, replicates in the intestine cells, and then it enters the bloodstream. Now, after that, 1 out of every 200 cases, the virus attacks the central nervous system, destroying cells in the spinal cord. Now, this is where it's such an extremely dangerous virus. If the virus destroys cells in the spinal cord, that is where it leads to all kinds of paralysis. I mean, mostly we see paralysis of the legs, but there are other forms as well. It can even affect the back, it can affect the neck. It can actually destroy any part of the body because it's a central nervous system. Now, after that, destruction of nerve cells results in paralysis, mostly in the legs, like I said. Now, the other thing that happens is the virus is excreted in the feces. Now, that can further contaminate food or water, especially in areas with poor sanitation and where you don't have clean drinking water, where the food can be contaminated. And once it enters an area like that, it can spread to other people. Now, so basically, it's highly contagious, transmitted by person to person, affects children mostly under the age of 5. And a few things, the vaccine was created in the 1950s. In 1988, there are 350,000 cases. In 1988, there are 350,000 plus cases in the world. Okay. By 96, it was down to 70,000 cases. And by 2014 actually, India is polio free. These are global figures, by the way. India becomes polio free in 2014, and 2020 Africa is polio free. Okay, and 21 Philippines becomes polio free. Now, the only two countries, like I said, that actually are still suffering the effects of polio are Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay. Now, like I said, there are 3 types of the virus, and they have specific names, and these are things you should remember whenever we talk about prelims. As a kind of things especially since the issue is now in news, it's necessary that you be aware of a few things about this. Now, the first type is called Brunhilde. That is type 1. Second one is called Lansing. Third one is called Leon. So please remember these names. These are, you will see the word WPVT1. What it basically means is wild polio virus type 1, then there will be type 2, and there is a type 3. So these are the names that you need to remember. So this is Brunhilde is type 1. This is type 2, Lansing, and the third is Leon. Okay. So remember these three names. This one I want you to remember this. These three names I want you to remember. Now the first successful demonstration of a polio vaccine was Hilary Koprowski in 1950, and this was a oral polio vaccine. We have oral and intravenous. These are the two types of basically you either the first one was an OPV, oral polio vaccine. The second type is intravenous. The first you have to remember again these names. Remember the name Hilary Koprowski in 1950. She created the scientists created an oral polio virus, and this could be taken through the mouth. You had to just drink it down. Now, this was an inactivated virus, that is, it was killed. The second type of virus was created by Jonas Salk, and it was announced in 1955. This was an inactivated one. Another one was created by Albert Sabin, and this came into effect commercial use in 1916. So these are the three names you need to remember. One is Hilary Koprowski 1950, because she created OPV. Then Jonas Salk in 1955. Now, 11% of infections, the virus can migrate from the gastrointestinal tract to CNS. So 11% can hit CNS. Central nervous system. Okay. Now, because there are three types of viruses, we need three types of vaccines. So we have three types of vaccines basically. So you have a vaccine for WPV T1, you have vaccine for T2, you have vaccine for T3. Now, this is another thing I want you to remember. What's the incubation period? It incubates for a period of 3 to 6 days. Okay. And if the disease progresses to cause paralysis, this generally occurs between 7 to 21 days. In the case of paralysis, we can see the symptoms in 7 to 21 days. Okay, but otherwise the incubation period is 3 to 6 days. Now, there are three terms that you need to know when we talk about vaccines. One is inoculation. It's basically the act of implanting a pathogen, which is in this case a virus, or a microbe into the person or the recipient. Till early 1800s, inoculation referred only to variolation. That is from the Latin word variola, smallpox. That is the basic, you need to remember this as well. Variola is from... So remember this word, variola. So basically when we are talking about variolation, it comes from this word called variola, which is Latin for smallpox. Now vaccination is the act of implanting or giving somebody a vaccine. And these two terms are generally used interchangeably. So inoculation and vaccination are generally, many times they're used one for the other. And there's really not much of a difference. though some people would insist there's a difference. Now, the third thing we talk of is immunization. Immunization is actually the process that happens after somebody is given a vaccine. It's a process through which immunity is developed to that specific disease. It's basically the response of the body to a specific disease. So these are the three terms you need to remember. You have inoculation, along with it variolation, which comes from the Latin word variola for smallpox. Then you have vaccination, which is very similar to inoculation. And third, we have immunization. Now, there are two types of polio vaccines. One is given orally and the other is given by injection. Like I said, we have OPV. OPV is most commonly used in India. Now, OPV, this is where our current story enters. I mean, current situation, actually, this is where we start to actually understand why there has been a case in India. Oral polio vaccine contains a weakened form of polio virus. Unlike inactivated polio virus, which contains inactivated or killed. But in the case of India, for us, around in the developed world, people tend to use a IPV, which is an intravenous one, and that's basically an injection. And people use that for vaccination because they have a larger body of people who are trained in the medical field. However, in the case of India, we have a very large population and we have one of the best vaccination programs in the whole world. I mean, extremely successful. And because we have a large number of people to be vaccinated, we tend to use oral polio vaccines. But that is where the problem is. This contains a weakened form of polio virus, not an inactivated or a killed one. And once we have a weakened form of any virus, it has a certain percentage that can actually result in disease. So 1 in every 2.7 million cases of vaccination can result in actually the person getting a disease. Now, this happens many times because the person's immunity might not be very strong, and the child, mostly it's children basically, the child's immunity may be because of their diet or because of the environmental factors, their immunity might be compromised, wherein the act of giving a vaccination can actually result in the disease coming into the person. Disease manifesting in the person, and that is what has happened in Meghalaya, where when a child was vaccinated, that resulted in the disease. So this is quite different from a wild polio virus, which is the reason we continue to be polio free. Because there is a case in India, it does not mean that we are no longer polio free. We are still polio free as a country. This is just a statistical probability. This means that we need to pay more attention to the immunity of the children, to their diet, to the environmental factors and other things, so that this 1 out of every 2.7 million does not happen. That should not happen. So that is what it is. That is where the problem is. Now, where did this happen? Now, there is one more thing that happens. When a child is given a polio vaccine and the child, suppose it results in infection, like in the case of Meghalaya, it was in West Garo Hills in one of the districts. I'll just show you. Like this is where it happened in a place called Tikrila. A child tested positive for polio, and this is a vaccine derived case, which is distinctly different from wild polio cases. So when we say a country is polio free, we are saying wild polio is eradicated. This is a statistical problem. Now, because we are giving a weakened virus, this can happen. Now, there is another problem that happens when we give a oral polio virus. The weakened virus can be shed in the stools of the child, and that can further lead to contamination. And that again can lead to a cycle of somebody getting actually infected. So that actually is there in that possibility exists in the world. For example, in the United States in 2023, 524 polio cases were there across, according to the CDC, there have been 524 polio cases across 32 countries. So, in 2023, we had 524 cases in 32 countries. So, this the case that we saw in India is not an isolated one. This actually happens around the world. There are a few more cases that have happened in India. Let us look at them. Now, there was a case in West Bengal in 2011. Now, India, of course, became polio-free in 2014, but that was after we were polio-free for 3 successive years. So, however, there was a case in West Bengal in last reported case of wild polio was in West Bengal in 2011. And after that, there have been multiple cases of vaccine-derived polio across the country. There was a case in Kerala in 2024. There was also a case in Meghalaya this year. So, these are the 2 cases that have happened. But from the perspective of prelims, the last reported case of wild polio in India was in West Bengal in 2011. So, after that, for 3 years, we continued to be polio-free, and that is where in 2014, India was declared a polio-free country. Now, injectable polio vaccine is actually a better tool to contain polio as a polio virus and polio infections. But the problem is our current level of skill among the people who give vaccinations is not really at the level where we can actually. This is a slightly skilled one, and our people are not at there yet. And oral pills, oral drops are a lot more easier for controlling polio. Now, so right now, to sum up, we have had 2 cases this year, one in Kerala and one in Meghalaya. Meghalaya one has actually found more news time, and that's the reason people are discussing it. This does not affect the fact that India is polio-free. Only if there is a wild polio virus would a country stop being polio-free. What we are seeing is what is called a vaccine related polio case, and that can statistically happen in 1 out of 2.7 million cases. If 2.7 million children are vaccinated, one of them likely can get polio because of the vaccination. This is vaccine derived. And in 2023, there were more than 500 cases in about 32 countries. Hema Committee report. Now, let us discuss this. Now, what you must have heard of the Hema Committee report. This was basically in 2017, the Kerala government, the government of Kerala, they set up a committee as a response to a demand to basically study the status of women and the problems faced by women and the exploitation of women in the Malayalam film industry. And this year, they have just released their report, and this has actually found a lot of traction in the news. And let us just see what this was, how this came about, what are the major findings. Let us look at that. Now, this is what is called the Justice Hema Committee report. It marks a massive, basically, point where there is an ongoing struggle for gender equality, and this actually is this is the first time a study of this kind has been, a report of this kind has been brought out that involves any film industry. It's a well-known fact that exploitation of women is fairly widespread in many of the film industries across the world. For the first time, what India has done is, or rather, government of Kerala has done is, they constituted a committee. It was a 3-member committee, and they have come out with a report. Now, in 2017, there was a horrifying case where an actress was kidnapped and subjected to sexual violence repeatedly. And there was a lot of anger in the people. And after that, there was a committee formed that was called the Women in Cinema Collective. There was a group that was formed called Women in Cinema Collective. Now, this group demanded that something be done about the kind of exploitation that's happening. They said it's not just one case of sexual assault and sexual violence, that this is actually fairly widespread. And in response to that, a 3-member committee was formed. It had a High Court Justice K. Hema and the former actress called Sharada, and a retired IAS officer called K.B. Valsala Kumari. Now these 3 people, they were appointed by the government to come out with a report. Now there have been at least 17 distinct forms of exploitation across 30 professional categories. Now the work of the committee was not easy. What happened was that people were not actually forthcoming to come and share they were scared, and they also had to, there was not actually adequate infrastructure available for the committee. 2 of them were actually living in Madras, and most of the work had to be done in Kerala, so there had to be a lot of travel. They couldn't actually spend a lot of time continuously in one place. Then sometimes the recordings of the people who would come and stand in front of the committee, that went on from 10 in the morning till 9 in the evening, 9 in the night actually. So they actually put in a lot of effort. And then what they've come out with is, they've identified 30 professional categories. Across, there are 30 different professional categories and at least 17 distinct forms of exploitation in all of these categories. Now, this is actually a reflection on women's struggles every day, specifically in the film industry, more specifically in Malayalam industry, but also about the presence of patriarchy in the society. Now, for many women, film industry has been a space where their rights are routinely violated. This is kind of taken for granted. It's a highly patriarchal system where power dynamics are completely in favor of men. They're completely skewed against women. And even their contributions are continuously undervalued. In fact, if you look at any film industry, the number of women directors, the number of women producers is actually minuscule. Women are routinely paid less. Women are actually not even the technicians. Among the female technicians are not many. So these are just the... Now, it is basically a patriarchal culture that marginalizes women and perpetuates gender equality. The report exposed this basically. And what are the major findings of the report? Let us look at that. There are 17, like I said, forms of sexual exploitation that have been pointed out by the Hema Committee report. Let us look at those things. Now, what they said was, first, sexual demands are made from women from the time they enter the industry. It's kind of, there is a barrier only, and the way to cross that barrier is to be sexually exploited. It's a horrifying thing. There isn't any condition, any situation where you can say the way to enter this particular field is through being sexually exploited. This is fairly common according to the Hema Committee report in Malayalam industry. And we don't know, but probably at least Malayalam industry is making an effort to find out what's wrong. We don't know what's happening in the other industries. Now, the second thing they said was sexual harassment, abuse, assault take place at workplace, during transportation and places of accommodation. Many times you have shootings outside. So it's not like women are unsafe in only studios, they're unsafe even when they travel out for work. Then they said that women are tortured if they express resentment or unwillingness to fulfill sexual demands. Then there is a lack of basic facilities for women, including toilets and changing rooms. Now, this was a problem that has been written about by many actors from the TV industry as well, that they would not have adequate toilets actually, which is unbelievable. How difficult is it to actually put up a toilet? Now, women lack safety at workplaces and accommodation, unauthorized and illegal banning of individuals. So basically, if somebody stands up and says that, these are my rights, I'm not going to be exploited, they're actually banned from their work. Now, silencing of women under the threat of banning them from the industry. So they can even be threatened, they have been threatened. Male dominance, gender bias and gender discrimination. Now, the use of drugs, alcohol, and disorderly conduct, misbehavior at place of workplace, these are fairly common, according to the Hema Committee report. Being subject to demeaning, vulgar comments at workplaces, these are not things that are normal. You can't be subjected to, vulgar comments at your place of work. That just it's actually illegal. Non-execution of contracts between employee and employees to suit the individual requirements, that's another way of exploiting people and forcing them into whatever they don't want to do actually. Failure to pay agreed remuneration. Now remember, this is not only for actors. There are 30 categories, 30 professional categories we're talking about. So actresses is only one category, okay? There are 30 professional categories that includes all the way from junior artists, technicians, directors, everybody. Now, the other thing they have said is that there is disparity of remuneration between men and women. This does not again mean only actors. We're also talking about junior artists, talking about, say, what are called extras on the set, or we're talking about photographers, talking about cinematographers, or everybody, or somebody who moves the equipment. Now, there is a resistance and reluctance to allow women to work on the technical side of cinema. That's why you don't see too many cinematographers who are women. Just one example. There is online harassment. Now, this is a new phenomena. When people are standing up to this kind of an exploitation, they are being subjected to continuous barrage of comments and threats online. That is a new thing that is happening. Lack of legal awareness about their own rights, this is happening. Absence of any legally constituted authority to address their problem. Remember, in our country, every workplace must have a grievance cell, must have a women complaint cell. I mean, it's part of the necessity that's not being fulfilled by the Malayalam film industry. Now, for years, women in Malayalam industry have been silenced. Their experiences, they have been discriminated. Now, the Hema Committee report actually provides a platform for these women to express their voices. This should actually have a broader impact on women, and it should resonate with a lot of others. Now, there have been a lot of criticisms of the Hema Committee report. One major criticism has been several parts of the report are redacted. What the committee has done is they have not given out the names and details of the people who came and spoke to them. Those who actually appeared in front of the committee, their identities have been protected. Those parts of the report are actually redacted or they are blanked out. Now, this has been criticized by a lot of people, but that's the way it should be. I mean, otherwise, they would be actually victimized and stigmatized in their own community, in their own industry, and they'd probably not be able to earn a living. As it is, people are not willing to come and speak to them, and it has been a very difficult project for the Hema Committee, but they have still done it. Now, what finally the Hema Committee has said is that there should be a civil court-like tribunal, which can actually, it should be set up so that people can put their cases in front of it and they can actually handle this. So this was about the Hema Committee report, and it was constituted in 2017 in response to a horrifying act of sexual violence, and it took about 7 years. There were 3 people on it, and they studied 30 professional categories, come out with 17 forms of distinctly different exploitation of women. Now, reviving the PM-WANI scheme. What is the PM-WANI scheme? Why does the government want to revive it? How does it impact us? Let us try and understand that. Now, the Prime Minister WANI scheme, or the Prime Minister Wi-Fi Access Network Interface, was launched by the Department of Telecommunication in 2020. Now, what the scheme aims to do is enhance public Wi-Fi spots so that people have access to high-speed internet access across the country. Now, they wanted to increase the government wants to increase employment for small and micro enterprises, to encourage shops and establishments to provide Wi-Fi so that also becomes a source of revenue for them. And it also creates an ecosystem, and it constitutes of 4 parts. Now, there is a central registry, there's an app, there is a public data office aggregator, and then there is a public data office. Now, there's a very simple way of understanding this. We have the PM-WANI scheme. Basically, we're trying to push internet adoption in rural areas. And one of the problems when we talk about internet adoption is the absence of access to internet. I mean, you're carrying a device, but you cannot connect anywhere. So the government came up with the idea that we can have public data offices. Now, some of you might remember, some of you might not know, we used to have PCOs. These are public call offices. Now, these are places where it's not, I don't think there are many left anymore, but you still might see an odd one here and there. Basically, people have these telephones in their shops where one could go and make a call, and people will make a little money off it. These are basically public call offices, and sometimes there are also independent units kept around. Now, using the same idea, the government came out with public data office. Instead of a call, this idea is dead because everybody carries a phone. Now, instead of this, we could replace them with public data offices, wherein somebody has, let us say, a Wi-Fi router, a Wi-Fi device, and you can basically, you'll be able to, somebody has a Wi-Fi router, and what if you could access it? And there are Wi-Fi routers like this practically in every single shop or many shops across the market. And if you have an app, you could interface with this and get data. You could pay through the app. You could buy data, whatever the prices are. I mean, probably they'd be determined by the market forces. You'd be using this app, and you'd be getting Wi-Fi from public data offices. It's a fairly simple idea. And wherever you go, anybody who has a public data office, you'd have access to that particular Wi-Fi. This is what the PM-WANI model is basically. In very simple terms, it becomes like a public data call office. It is a public data office. Small shops and establishments, they would have a device with Wi-Fi. You would have an app that individuals would carry apps on phones, and you would use this Wi-Fi, and you would pay for this as per use. If you use more data, you pay more. You don't use much, you don't pay more. And wherever you go, you get the same quality of high quality Wi-Fi network. This was the basic plan that the government had. Now, for achieving this, the government said that there will not be any licensing fee for providing broadband internet through these public data networks. Remember, when somebody is providing data or internet services, they have to actually pay money. The government says no need for that. Now, it will actually help small businessmen and small shops make a little more money while providing internet access to practically everybody in the country. So this was the plan. What happened to this? Let us try and understand. So this has, like I said, 4 aspects. There's a central registry. I mean, we have to have a central registry where everybody is registered. There'd be an app provider. There are so far a few apps that have been put into the ecosystem which allow you to do this. Then you have a public data office aggregator. Then there is a public data office. The PDO, that will be the small shop with their Wi-Fi. That is a PDO. Somebody has to handle those places. That would be called the public data office aggregator. So these 4 parts together constitute the PM-WANI scheme. Now, like I said, the public data office will establish, maintain and operate a Wi-Fi Wi-Fi spot. The public data aggregator would ensure the authorization and accounting of the PDOs. Then the app provider would develop an app that allows you to use these Wi-Fis. And there's a central registry to ensure that all of these are in order. Now the central registry, please do remember this one small little thing. It will be run by the Center for Development of Telematics. So this is the authority which would run this, the PM-WANI scheme. It's actually an elegant solution for a difficult problem. Now the Telecom Regulatory Authority, it had the 70th amendment that said that the regulatory framework for the PM-WANI scheme has been changed. What are the changes? The National Communication Policy of 2018 said that Connect India was a mission that had to be set up to enable the deployment of 10 million Wi-Fi spots. So we said that there would be 10 million Wi-Fi spots in 2018. Let us see where we have reached right now. Now, the Bharat 6G vision also sets a goal of 10 million Wi-Fi spots by 2022 and 50 million by 2030. So we have actually pretty ambitious goals as a country, and they're not actually that difficult to achieve if you look at it. So this is what 10 million by 22, 50 million by 2030. So Digital India 2030, we would have 50 million Wi-Fi spots across the country. However, the present numbers are much lower than that. They're about 6 lakhs. We will see the numbers. As per the government information from the government that is available, only 2 lakh have been deployed. And there are only 199 PDOs. That's not much. 199 PDOs is hardly anything. And there are 111 app providers as of 2024, July 24. Now, there's also another thing. When we talk of internet access, we also talk of data usage. So the average data usage is 1 GB till last year, and it has come down a little over the past few months. However, this is much less than the monthly average data being consumed by everybody everywhere. Now, to sum up the numbers, right now we have active connections. Right now, we have 201 active connections. These are the active connections right now, number of active connections. The PDO aggregators. These are the active app providers, 111. Just under 2.5 lakhs Wi-Fi spots are available across the country. Now, what are the reasons for the poor penetration? Why hasn't this idea taken off? Because it's such an elegant, beautiful idea. Now, the extremely high cost of backhand internet connectivity charged by the telecom service providers, that is one problem. Internet service providers, they are also charging a lot from the PDOs, that is other problem. Now, the physical part of the network, that is again the cost of actually running cables, the cost of installing routers, that is again has become a reason for not implementing this idea properly. People are not able to absorb those costs. Also, the TSPs and the ISPs is that PDOs connect to public Wi-Fi access points using expensive internet lease lines instead of regular fiber to the home optic networks which the broadband uses. Because of this, again, they're not able to. The internet service providers are actually insisting that the PDOs use a much more expensive option, because of which, again, the idea has not been implemented in properly. For comparison, in terms of cost comparison, if you look at this, 100 Mbps of ILL rates versus FTTH. Now, ILL is, like I said, internet lease lines and fiber to the home lines. If you see the costs of these two, there's a difference of 40 to 80 times. Now that when a project is becoming 80 times more expensive, unlikely anybody will ever implement it, irrespective of the field of economy we're talking about. So that is one problem. Practically no small shop owner is able to pay the high tariffs that are coming with these commercial entities, because of which they're not taking it up. So basically it's mostly the cost factor that has actually led to the failure of this idea so far. Otherwise, we were talking about 10 million cases. That's about 1 crore actually. Instead, we have implemented only less than 2.5 lakh. The reason is largely the cost and the path that the internet service providers are insisting that people, the PDOs take. Now, what are the changes provided by the 70th Amendment? They are saying that the public data offices shall be the same, tariff will be the same as for the retail broadband users. So, FTTH costs will be the same cost for PDOs, so that 40 to 80 time differential that we are talking of, that has been removed by the 70th Amendment. Okay, and the rationalization of costs will actually see this idea pick up a little. Now, there are a few other issues that we need to talk of when we talk of public Wi-Fi spots. We also have to consider that there will be issues of security, about how safe and secure this Wi-Fi is for somebody to use. So that is one issue that will have to be addressed. I'm sure we will address it over a period of time, but right now we are not really written into that, or we have not thought about that as a country. But that will be a real problem, because phones can be hacked, data can be stolen, accounts, money can be wiped out of. Now everybody has linked up their own bank accounts, we have government apps that we carry all our documents on our phones, we carry all our money on our phones. So when we are trying to access a public Wi-Fi network, it's necessary that they be secure. So this will be another thing that we'll have to consider, but the rationalization of course should help the PM-WANI network take off, PM-WANI scheme take off. Let us discuss New India Literacy Program. Basically this is called, this is an idea that has been, this is a scheme that has been launched to ensure that everybody in the country becomes literate. Now about New India Literacy Program, what is called NILP, it's basically based on it's called Nav Bharat Saksharta Karyakram, is a centrally sponsored initiative, and it's been launched by the Ministry of Education, and it aligns with the National Education Policy of 2020. Now it was originally launched for a 5-year period. It was for 5 years, from 2022 to 20. It's originally launched from 2022 to 26-27, with an outlay of 1,037 crores, 1,037.90 crores, of which 700 crores will be from the center and 337.90 states. So this is the division of how the money is going to be spent. What is the objective? There are 5 objectives, and the objective is basically to reach 5 crore learners for ensuring foundational literacy and numeracy. And this will cover non-literates above the age of 15. Now what happens generally is, if somebody is not educated, doesn't gain literacy by the age of 15, there are not many programs that are run for them other than adult education, which used to be done and hasn't seen the kind of success one would like to. So this is basically tackling that problem. Those who have fallen through the gaps of the system and have not been educated, this program will ensure that they gain education and they gain literacy. Now, there's going to be an online teaching, learning and assessment system to cover all the lessons. There will be a collaboration with the NIC, NCERT and National Institute of Open Schooling. Now, this is basically what we are trying to do. The beneficiaries under the system, they will be identified by door-to-door service on mobile apps by the surveyors in the states and union territories. The term now we are using is non-literate rather than illiterate. Non-literate can also avail the benefit of the scheme through registration from any place through the app. Now that gives you mobility. You no longer have to actually go to one particular place after your work is done for becoming illiterate. You can actually use your phones. That's the idea. Now the scheme is basically mainly based on volunteerism for teaching and learning, and volunteers can register through the mobile app. That's the whole idea. And the teaching material and resources have been provided from the Diksha platform of NCERT, and there will be modes of learning, further modes of learning like TV, radio and other things. Now, in order to push for adult literacy under the New India Literacy Program, NILP, we want to achieve full literacy. The meaning of non-literate has to be understood. So according to the Ministry of Education, literacy may be understood as the ability to read, write and compute with comprehension. That is to identify, understand and interpret and create along with, now this is an important idea. This is a new idea, and that's actually important idea that has been brought in. So we are talking about critical life skills, and we also talking such as digital literacy, financial literacy, etc. Now this is going to form a part of the New India Literacy Program. Till now we have never considered life skills as an essential tool. It was only about as long as you could write, read, basically people could sign their name, they were considered literate. Now that has changed. Now we are saying that critical life skills must be achieved. You should be able to read, comprehend, count, and you should have critical life skills. That is how we are going to say somebody is literate. Meaning of full literacy has been defined now. If a state is 95% literate, we are saying the state is completely literate. Now, how is one declared literate? An individual can be declared literate if they pass this foundation literacy and numeracy assessment test. If anybody passes this, they should be over the age of 15. If they passes this, then we say that the person is literate. Now in 2023, 39,94,564 adult learners appeared for FLNAT exams, of which 36,17,303 were certified literate. So this is the data for last year. Now, according to what are the challenges that we are facing as a country? According to 2011 census, almost 26 crore people are not literate in the country. That is a fairly large number. So we are going to address that. This is trying to address that. Now, women are more disadvantaged than men, considering that we are a patriarchal society, not unexpected. Out of the 25 crores that we are saying, 9.08 crores are women or men, and so basically 9.08 crore men and about 16.68 crore women. These are not literate. So this is what we are trying to address. So this is the number we are trying to correct, and that is what the NILP program is about. Now, an estimated 18.12 crore individuals are still illiterate despite advancements under several programs. Now, there is a pass percentage in the FLNAT exam has fallen a little in the past few years. It used to be between 89.64 to 91.27 in 23. In 24, it has dropped to 85.27 points. So by about 4 percentage points, the pass percentage has fallen. Now the budget has been reduced for this. Earlier it was 157 crores. Now it has been brought down to 100 crores. So that is what this program is about. Basically, this is an adult literacy program with a focus more on the actual skills gained by people that are relevant in the current context. It's like you should be able to use your phone, you should be able to manage your finances. Financial literacy has never been taught in our country at any educational level till now. I mean, it's an essential skill. So the government is saying that for a person to be considered literate, they must have financial skills, digital skills, critical life skills. So this is the new thing that is being done, and everything will be done online so that it's very easy to access it. People don't have to visit a physical school anymore. They could be working anywhere, and with the current proliferation of phones, this should be actually allow people to become literate. And now they can even take an exam to actually be certified that they are literate. Now, government has banned 156 fixed combination medicines. Now, let us try and understand this. What are fixed combination medicines? Why has the government banned it? How does it affect us? Is this the first time that has been done, or is it part of a continuity? Now, the Union Ministry of Health has banned 156 fixed dose combinations, including popular antibiotics, painkillers, and multivitamins. Now, the ministry has said there is no therapeutic justification, and there are potential health risks that are there because of this. What are fixed dose combinations? Generally, for example, you must have bought a tablet. When you go and buy a tablet, say for fever, you may get something that has a tablet of a bit of paracetamol in it and a bit of brufen in it. So basically, paracetamol will cure your fever, and brufen is supposed to reduce pains. Now, that is a fixed drug combination. There could also be several others. So there is a proliferation of combinations like this. Now, why do manufacturers do this? How does it impact our health? Let us understand that. Now, the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, under Section 26A of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, is where these drugs have been banned. And this is an ongoing process. In 2018, 328 drugs were banned. Okay? In 2018, 328 drugs were banned, and a total of 419 FDCs have been banned since 2014. And what under Section 26 of the 26A of Drugs and Cosmetics Act, this is the act that has been used for banning these drugs. Now, where this all started was, we had something called there was a Cocotte panel which submitted its report in January 2015. Please remember this. Remember this name. This is where the whole thing starts, Cocotte panel. Okay. Now, they term 963 fixed drug combinations irrational and posing a health threat. There was a 6-member committee, and this was headed by a person called Chandrakant Kokte. He was a vice chancellor of KLE University, Karnataka, and they suggested that 963 FDCs be banned in 2015. Now, initially the government agreed to this, but then it turned out that people would obviously go to court, and then what happened was a Drugs and Technical Advisory Board was there, and now anything that's banned is banned after a report that is submitted by the technical committee. Okay. Now, they're also referred to as, what are these FDCs? They're actually referred to sometimes as cocktail drugs as well. Now, it basically is a product composed of any combination of a drug, a device, a biological product, a device that actually is used for curing diseases. And it, like I said, it could be something as simple as a brufen that is put together with paracetamol. Now, it's accepted that generally most doctors and pharmacologists would say that it's the best way to take a drug is to have a single compound. because that is how they've actually been developed, and they work best that way. Because when you have trials, when you have experiments, when you have people working in laboratories, when you have so many chemical compounds coming out, it's always a single compound or a few compounds that are targeting a very specific result. And that is how they're most effective. Now, however, there are advantages for fixed dose combinations. Sometimes they can be complementary actions, they can synergize effects, but they can give better tolerability, they can elongate the product life, and also can lead to better shelf life even sometimes, and actually better cost savings. That is a primary reason. Sorry. Now, what manufacturers say is that it's a rational way of doing things. However, there are problems with FDCs. For example, they can be adverse drug effects compared to drugs given individually. You may not be reacting to one particular compound, but you may react to another compound which you have taken unnecessarily. So that is a definite problem. Then many are actually irrational in India. That is what the studies have said. The most pressing concern is that they expose the patient to unnecessary risk of adverse drug reactions. That is the primary concern. Then there is also a financial burden. You're paying actually for compounds and drugs that you don't need. Maybe you don't need the other things that are part of that particular drug, but you're still paying for it. And you're just passing it out of your body, best case scenario, or it's actually having an adverse reaction on you. Now, because of the sales of pharmaceutical manufacturers continue to do this, what actually happens when we take substances like this is, there are some real problems. It can create antibiotic resistance. This is a recurring problem in the world. Antibiotic resistance is when you take a particular medicine and it does not work because the body, it's no longer effective. Your body has developed a resistance to that drug now. Similarly, the microbes actually that this particular compound is supposed to impact, they also start developing a resistance to that, and you have actually super microbes coming into the world. You have bacteria that are resistant to a lot of drugs. In fact, if you talk about antibiotics, for instance, we have first-line antibiotics and second-line antibiotics. In many cases, for many of us, the first-line antibiotics are not working anymore. That is because of this. FDCs have created the problem for everybody. So we have antibiotic resistance that is developing among people, which means that you also have either stronger and higher doses, or you have compounds that are much more stronger and actually affect your kidneys and other parts of the body very severely. Now, despite earlier bans, a 2023 study found that FDCs as a proportion of total antibiotics sold in India, they've increased. They've increased from 32.9% in 2008 to 37.3% in 2020. So basically, there's been a 5% increase. 5% increase in the percent. If you're talking about the number of drugs sold by a company, there's a 5% increase in FDCs that have been sold in a span of just 12 years. Clearly, this is because it's benefiting the manufacturers. When they can also, like I said, the other problem that comes is lessened therapeutic benefit or a different safety profile. And there was a study done about FDCs. It noted that India has the highest percentage of FDCs sold anywhere in the world, which is to say, out of 4.5 billion standard units, FDCs have been sold in India. 41.5% were not recommended by WHO. It's like half the FDCs sold are not recommended by WHO. That's the scenario in India. Now, another reason for the ban is the pricing control on essential medicines. The government actually tries to regulate prices on medicines so that we can afford it. The government decides the ceiling prices for average medicines based on the market. And companies, what they do is they create FDCs as a way of finding it around the prices. Sorry. So what they do is they escape the pricing control by creating FDCs. So if you have, the government may say this particular medicine, let us say even again paracetamol, the government may say this is the price of paracetamol depending on market conditions, and you cannot sell more than that. What the manufacturers will do is plug in 2 more compounds with that, and only those would be sold. You will not have only paracetamol anymore. You may have only that particular set of 3 compounds together with paracetamol, and that is not covered by the pricing control. The government didn't think of that, or rather government didn't say anything about that, so they can price it at any price they want to. Now if you see, this is a graph from Lancet. There was a publication about this same issue, and you can see that FDCs have peaked. FDCs have actually increased massively, say from 98 to 2010. They've actually grown up massively. Now, what are the FDCs that have been banned? There are several combinations of enzymes used for gastronomic problems. Lot of enzymes used for gastronomical problems, combinations of anti-allergic medicines, for example, nasal decongestants, syrups that break down mucus and all, combinations for the treatment of skin conditions, including menthol with aloe vera with vitamin E, then vitamin E in the form of medicated soap. These are not needed. They're just putting things together that people don't need. Combination of a migraine medicine. Now there is another combination of sildenafil, active ingredient in erectile dysfunction. These are some of the things that have been banned. Now there is another thing, for example, since we're talking about this is how actually these companies operate. There's a drug that's used for menstrual cramps. What the companies have done is they've added an anti-fibroid medicine which somebody may not need. So people may actually have adverse reactions to this. So the drugs that have been banned, the FTCs, are actually the government has done a brilliant job of it. And we have now a process in place, and unnecessary drugs are being weeded out of our system. There still are a very large number of them, but over a period of time we should be able to get rid of them. So to sum up, FDCs are actually not needed. Single combination drugs most of the time work better than FDCs, that is fixed drug combinations. And fixed drugs combinations can lead to antibiotic resistance, can have, most of the time don't have any kind of therapeutic value, and they can actually damage the body. They put a lot of pressure on kidneys. And most of the time the government and the doctors and the technical committees say that these are not needed. Over a period of time, the government has been banning one after the other. So like I said, we've been banning from 2015, we had the Cocktail panel. From then we have been banning, and now we have banned this again. National Pest Surveillance System. National Pest Surveillance System. Let's discuss this. This is a new thing the government has started. Let's just quickly discuss this. Now, the Union government has launched an artificial intelligence based National Pest Surveillance System that will help connect farmers with agricultural scientists. Now, what this is on August 15th, the government launched the NPSS. You should remember when it was launched. It's kind of thing that's always necessary. August 15th is when it was launched. And the idea is to connect 14 crore farmers across the country to scientists. Now the idea is to connect farmers across the country to scientists at a localized way, and needless to say, we're going to use apps and we're going to use phones for running these apps. The idea is that it's all going to be digitally done. Now, what are the key aspects of this? The AI uses tools to analyze pest data for effective control and management of pests, pest control rather. And this will enable farmers to actually capture and send images of infested crops or pests directly to scientists. So the moment somebody sees something has been damaged in their crop, they don't have to buy any pesticide, any insecticide. They could actually send the images to proper scientists who can then advise them about actually what to do instead of buying a generic. They're no longer at the whims and fancies of pesticide sellers and insecticide sellers. Now, what are the features of this platform, of the NPSS platform? It's going to be AI-driven analysis. So it's going to be artificial intelligence driven. It will utilize artificial intelligence to analyze real-time data that is being shared with the scientists. And there'll be a direct communication between the scientists and the farmers. And there'll be a reduction of pesticide dependency because people will not indiscriminately use any and every pesticide that is there. They'll be probably very specific. Maybe we can actually have much better ways of doing this. Now, there'll be a widespread reach because people can connect with the scientists from any part of the country. There will be an integration with the local outreach. So the idea is that you have state level or local district level authorities who are actually more aware of the problems there. They could step in and take care of it. And the biggest advantage would be this would actually lead to sustainable practices over a period of time. When we start reducing the dependence on pesticide, and maybe we can actually have sustainable ideas that can, sustainable practices for preventing pests and, infections and other things. So this is actually part of the government push to improve, ensure sustainable practices. Now, there are 7 use cases. One is a pest control. Second is we want to boost crop yield, reduction of pesticides, insecticides, and the sustainable practices always increases the crop yield. Then there'll be seasonal forecasting. There'll be enhanced IoT device data, Internet of Things device data. So we are going to use basically smartphones for doing all of this. Then there'll be better crop selection because now you have a scientist who actually knows what kind of crop would grow well in that area, the kind of water you have, what kind of weather is going to be there. So people will actually lose less money. Suppose there is a very heavy season of rain forecast. It doesn't make sense to put a crop like, say, groundnuts and peanuts because they'll just rot away underground. That is where your scientists step in and help people because they would know that, this is going to be an unusually heavy season of rains. Now, there will be chatbot for farmers. That's the other one. And there will be agricultural robots. I don't know when that would happen, but the idea is that we'll have agricultural robots which will reduce dependence on farm labor and boost yields. Now, the system will benefit farmers by providing timely information. This is a major aspect of it. What we want actually is timely information. People, when they timely information on pest attacks, thereby increasing productivity, that's what will happen. And the system requires no additional funding and will be implemented at the state level through outreach programs. See, there is no additional money that has to be spent. Everybody already has a phone. There are scientists in place. All you want to do is, if there is a pest or an infection, you want somebody to take a picture, give it to the scientist who has access to AI tools, will analyze it and give you the best possible solution for that. So there's no additional cost anywhere. Now, proposed outcome is that avoidance of pest epidemics. There will be moreover a repository of national pest scenario which will be available to various people across the country. Anybody could use it. Then this is how it's going to be done. First, there will be a data collection by the scout who will take a picture and then upload it. Then the data will be uploaded and then it will be sent into the database, then pest reporting and advisory module there'll be a data processing, then the pest reports will be there in different formats. The pest advisory would be fed by the experts. This is where the experts are going to come in, and it would be sent to the farmers who can then actually act on it. So this is how the system is going to work, and all of this is already in place. Only it's now being brought together to ensure greater efficiency. Now, like I said, this is the flowchart of the system. We get the pest images, the data is transferred, then there is dissemination. So this is what the government is planning on doing, and it's actually a very effective and useful idea, because we already have a large number of agricultural scientists and experts in this field, and they have access to actually a lot of this data, and they know the solutions that would work best. And only thing is, what's missing is that there's no communication happening between the farmers who are working in the fields and the scientists who are working on these ideas. Now, the farmers can actually get real-time inputs. It would massively improve agriculture across the country. Now, WHO has declared monkeypox a public health emergency global concern. So, what is monkeypox? What is a public health emergency, global emergency? And let us find out a little more about, first things first, we are not supposed to use the word monkeypox, even though we are using it a lot in India. The WHO in 2022 came out with a notification saying that from now on we are going to call it Mpox. Now, the reasons for that we'll discuss as well, but because the country has been everybody is using the word monkeypox, we are using that. Now, WHO has declared monkeypox a public health emergency of international concern because of the outbreaks in Congo, Democratic Republic Congo, and a few other African countries. Since 2022, there have been about 99,176 cases, and 208 deaths have been reported due to monkeypox. The spread of there is a new strain that has been found, and this has been the spread of this has been causing concern. Now, just to see, this is how actually the virus looks. This is the polio virus which we just discussed today, and this is the monkeypox virus. If we magnify it 15 nanometers, that's the HIV virus, and that's the SARS-CoV virus. Just to give you an idea of how actually this virus looks. Now, what does a public health emergency of global concern mean? It is declared for an extraordinary event, and which is determined to constitute a public health risk across the world. Now, what this effectively means is that it would trigger a coordinated response by WHO and all the states across the world, and there would be better international response, there would be better international cooperation, and there would be better funding for handling this problem. And also there would be collaborative efforts on sharing data and developing vaccines and fighting the disease. Now, when was monkeypox first discovered, and where was it discovered? These are the kind of things that we always have to keep track of, considering why we are doing this. Now, monkeypox was first discovered in Denmark in 1958, and it was discovered among monkeys that were kept for research purposes. Now, the first reported case of human case was a 9-month-old boy in Democratic Republic of Congo in 1970. So, in 1970, first human case. Okay. Now, following the eradication of smallpox in 1980 and smallpox vaccination across the world, Mpox steadily emerged as a problem in Central, East and West Africa. Since then, there have been two types of Mpox that have been identified. One is called Clade 1 and Clade 2. In East Africa and West Africa, they're called Clade 1 and Clade 2. And in 2003, there was an outbreak in the United States. And Since 2005, there have been thousands of cases across Democratic Republic of Congo. In 2017, it re-emerged again. Now, this is one thing I want you to remember, that the Congo Basin, that's this was basically, earlier it was called Congo Basin or Central African Mpox variant, and now it has been renamed as Clade 1. And the clade formerly known as the West African clade was renamed as Clade 2. Now, the reason for renaming Mpox as monkeypox as Mpox is, there are basically people said that this is not found only in monkeys. This is found, we really don't know from where this was discovered in monkeys, but from which animal it has come, we really don't know. People are still guessing that maybe it's a small set of mammals somewhere in Central Africa or something like that, but we really don't know. Because of that, they're saying the definition itself is wrong, that we can't call it monkeypox. And the other thing is, there is a racial angle to it. Calling this disease Mpox when you're having several outbreaks in Africa leads to a lot of racist angles to it. So they said that now we're going to call it only Mpox. For the same reason, for similar reasons rather, the two clades, earlier they were called Congo Basin clade and West African clade, have now been renamed as Clade 1 and Clade 2. So this is where this was, and that's the other thing. Now, monkeypox by itself is a rare disease that is it belongs to the same virus family as the smallpox, camelpox, and others. Now, this particular family has 12 viruses. The orthopox virus genus, it has actually 12 viruses, and smallpox is one of them, and monkeypox is also one of them, and there are others like camelpox and several others. So there are basically 12 viruses in this particular group, the genus. Now, these are diseases. What are zoonotic diseases? We need to know the meaning of this. These are diseases that spread from animals to humans. So generally when we have diseases, they are spreading from humans to humans. And many times over a period of time, we also have developed resistance, we develop drugs. But in some places, it so happens that animals act as reservoirs for diseases. The disease may not have any impact on that particular animal, but when it jumps into a human being, it will actually emerge as a disease. So these are called zoonotic diseases, those that come from animals into human beings. Monkeypox, like I said, was first discovered in 1958 when two outbreaks occurred in captive monkey colonies kept in Denmark. Now, hence the name monkeypox. So that itself is a bit of a misnomer. Because it was found in monkeys that were kept for research, it was called monkeypox, but now we are calling it Mpox. Remember Mpox. Now, what happens with this disease is, it can cause a painful rash, it can cause enlarged lymph nodes, it can lead to fever, headache, muscle ache, backache, low energy. Most people recover from this, but in some cases it can be fatal. Now, how does it transmit from people to, what is the route of transmission? Spreads from person to person, mainly through close contact. So somebody, if they have Mpox, that's how we interact with that person, that's how we get it. Now, close contact means skin to skin, such as touching or sexual activities, mouth to mouth or mouth to skin contact, can also be face to face, talking or breathing close. Now, because of this, recently there was a case from UAE where a person came from UAE, landed in Bangalore, and it was found that the person has Mpox. So now they're suggesting that people use masks like we used during COVID, to prevent the spread of mpox. Suppose somebody is breathing or coughing around you and that person has mpox, there is a chance you might get it. So they want to prevent that. So now masks have been reintroduced. And also there are being testing protocols set up for international travelers in many of the airports. Like I said, breathing close to another, this is how it can, so mouth to mouth, close contact, and respiratory particles. So this is how it can transmit, how it is transmitted, okay? Now, people with multiple sexual partners are at a high risk of getting mpox. This is what has been found across the world wherever they've had mpox outbreaks. During birth and pregnancy, it can be passed to the baby from the mother. Now, it can lead to loss of pregnancy if the mother gets mpox during pregnancy. So that is a very serious problem. I mean, it can lead to stillbirth, death of the newborn, or complications for the parent. Now, animal to animal transmission is what actually is bothering us, because like I said, the reservoir is still animals. Animals to animals through bites, scratches, or hunting, skinning, trapping, cooking, or even playing with carcasses or eating animals. The reservoir, like I said, for the disease remains unknown, but it's thought to be small mammals in tropical Africa. Might be, we're not sure, but this might be the case. In tropical Africa. Okay, so the orthopox virus is thought to be, it could be small mammals in tropical Africa, okay. Now, what are the signs and symptoms? Like I said, rash, fever, sore throat, headache, muscle aches, backache, low energy, swollen lymph nodes. For some people, mpox is a rash, others might have muscle aches and fevers, and generally spreads on the palms and other places. Now, the incubation period, this is what we always talk of whenever we talk of any virus. Incubation period is 5 to 21 days is incubation period. Illness lasts from 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks. Illness. 5 to 21 days is and symptoms we just discussed. And the transmission is through lash, lesions, bodily fluids, and contaminated objects. And prevention, how do we prevent it? Avoid close personal contact with people who have a rash. Avoid contact with animals. Avoid contact with contaminated objects, and wash your hands. Actually, some of the things are similar to what all of us did during COVID. Now, what is the treatment and how do we prevent mpox? Right now, there is no treatment for there is no vaccination for mpox. However, because it's in the same family as smallpox, if people have received a smallpox vaccination, it has been found to be effective in preventing an mpox infection. There is a good chance that the people who have received smallpox vaccinations will not get mpox. But what has happened is, after smallpox has been eradicated and it's no longer present in the world, many people who have been born after a particular period of time have not been given smallpox vaccinations anyway, because it's not there anymore. Because of that, those people who have not received smallpox vaccinations are at a risk. Now, getting an mpox vaccine can reduce infection. It is recommended for people at high risk of mpox. So, the vaccine can be administered to a person. There is no effective cure antiviral treatment for Mpox right now. Just like we had with COVID, viruses are extraordinarily difficult to handle. And what is the treatment and vaccination? Right now, this is something I want you to pay attention to. There are, as of August 24, there are 4 vaccines available to prevent Mpox, although supplies are limited and they were originally meant for combating smallpox. So there is MBABN marketed as Jynneos, Imaven or Imavenex. This is manufactured by Bavarian Nordic and used against Mpox in Europe, USA and Canada. There is LC16 from Japan. Then there is Orthopox Vac used in Russia. And there is ACAM 2000 by Emergent Biosolutions. So please remember these names. These are the kind of things that can end up as, prelims questions and things like that. There are 4 vaccines available. Just remember basically what they are and where they have been developed. Now, what is the reason for the current concern? It's basically what has happened is that the clade 1b, that is we saw the 2 clades, has primarily transmitted through sexual contact, and this is causing concern. Historically, clade 1 infections, which are deadlier than clade 2, spread through zoonotic events, but sexual transmission was previously unreported. So this was basically earlier people would interact with an animal and then get that particular disease. But now we are seeing that the mode of transmission has changed, and this is what is causing concern. Over 100 cases of clade 1b have been reported, and they have been reported from Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda, where Mpox was not previously reported. That's a more important thing. Now, risk for India. During 2022 outbreak, India reported only 27 cases, primarily from the less deadly clade 2. Now, remember, clade 1 is what is scaring governments across the world. Earlier in 22, we had 27 cases of clade 2, initially related to international travel, but later they spread locally. Now we are seeing clade 1, or more accurately clade 1b, and this is a much more deadlier form. Experts have emphasized that the current surge is basically a global emergency because we have not seen this type of transmission. That is a basic problem. Now, recently a 38-year-old from Kerala arrived from UAE has been, like I said, has been hospitalized with reported, symptoms of Mpox. Then there was also a case in Delhi that was also confirmed, a person from Haryana. Now, there are a couple of other things we need to know. Since WHO is leading the effort, WHO is basically founded in 1948, and it has 194 members, and it's headquartered in Geneva. It's basically involved in vaccination campaigns and supports emergencies and countries in primary healthcare and things like that. And it's basically funded by members' fees based on wealth, population. There's a complex calculation for that. India became a party to WHO in January 1948, and we're also a member state of the Southeast Asian region at the WHO. Now, Dr. Chandramani, you should remember this, is Indian. Dr. Chandramani served between 1948 and 68. First regional director for Southeast Asia was an Indian. Okay, so remember this name. Dr. Chandramani was the first regional director, served between 48 and 68. Currently, the post is again occupied by Dr. Poonam Khetrapal, who's been in office since 2014. And Remember, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan served as WHO's chief scientist from 2019 to 2022. So that was about Mpox and cause of concern, because there is a new mode of transmission, and it's been found in places where there have never been reported cases, and we still don't know from where this virus has come. We just know that it might be from small animals and small mammals and not necessarily from monkeys. We still don't know the reservoir for this, and there are vaccines being developed, but they're not yet available, and there are 4 vaccines, but treatments, and it is still a deadly virus. That's the reason there is a global health emergency. Waiving clinical trials for drugs approved in select countries. So this is a new development that has happened in the country, and clinical trials have been waived for drugs approved in a few countries. What is this? How does it work? Let us just see it quickly. The central government has decided to waive clinical trials from 5 countries, US, UK, Australia, Japan, Canada and EU. And this could make drugs easily available and could make them cheaper for us in India. Clinical trials can test drugs. They can test devices. They can test even. Basically, we want to see when we get a particular medical device or a medicine that it go through a proper process, and that it will be actually useful for us in terms of our own genetic makeup and in terms of its effectiveness. And the way a particular medicine works changes from region to region depending on the climatic conditions. For example, many vaccinations that are used in India, they tend to be, we have to have stronger doses because the tropical conditions require stronger dosages. So this was actually a learning from vaccinations. So a similar thing can happen even with drugs. But however, this is a change we have done. Now, these are the bodies that actually take care of these things in India. We have the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, Drug Controller General of India, Indian Council of Medical Research, and we have a Clinical Trial Registry of India. These are the 4 bodies. Now, what is the present situation of clinical trials in India? Several medicines are already approved by other regulatory authorities, are available. Okay, say in the US, UK and EU are not immediately available for us because they have to go through the process of trials and clinical trials and testing in India, because of which they're not easily available. Because certain regulatory requirements under Drugs and Cosmetics Act that we just discussed and rules made thereunder, they were actually enforced in enforcement, which ensured that these drugs had to be tested. But now that we are seeing that large databases are available, and there's also learning from COVID that things could be developed much more faster and they could be effective as well. So based on our recent learnings, the government is bringing these changes. Okay. Now, this basically, when we have a more elaborate system, leads to a delay in launching a new or novel medicine, because of which people suffer. So the government has changed that, and only from markets where we know testing is rigorous and of a very high standard. Now, this will significantly benefit both the domestic and foreign drug manufacturers, and especially in the case of cancers, rare diseases, and like spinal muscular atrophy and autoimmune conditions, these medicines will be very useful. This waiving of this rule will be very useful. There will be also a considerable reduction in the cost of various medicines, potentially transform healthcare landscape in India. However, there are concerns. Like I said, there has been a report in 2012 from the Parliamentary Standing Committee, it's the 59th report, that said that we should probably have medicines tested more in India so that they are more efficient and they work better for us. Basically, they said our genetic makeup might require different kind of testings and maybe tweaking of the medicines. That's what they said. Now, what are the legal provisions of this? This is done under Rule 101. Now, this is being done under Rule 101 of the new Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules of 2019. And basically, from these countries that I mentioned, we don't have to have clinical trials anymore. There are 5 categories of drugs. It doesn't mean all kinds of drugs have been waived off. All clinical trials from these countries have been waived off. There are only 5 categories. Let us look at those categories. Now, the categories that are mentioned, they're actually quite important, and they're actually very, rationally thought out categories. First is orphan drugs for rare diseases. I'll describe that in a minute. Second is gene and cellular therapy products. New drugs used in pandemic situations. We've already seen this in the case of COVID. There was a special, waiver given off by many countries, including India, for the vaccines that came, and it saved probably millions of lives. New drugs used for special defense purposes, and new drugs having significant therapeutic advances over current standard. So these are the only conditions under which trials will be waived off, not for every drug. Now, what is an orphan drug? This is an important idea, and I want you to pay attention to this. Now, what is an orphan drug? Now, there are medical conditions that are extremely rare in the world. When a drug is developed for that rare disease, it's called an orphan drug, because the number of other conditions it can treat, other people it can treat, it's very low. And these drugs can only be developed with active support of the government. For example, in India, we actually have a very clear definition of what is an orphan drug. If a medical condition affects less than 5 lakh people, that can be called a rare disease, and the drug used to treat that can be called an orphan drug, and then that drug does not have to go through trials in India. Now, WHO says that an orphan drug affects less than 65 people per 1 lakh, and there have been more than 7,000 diseases like this. There are more than 75,000 rare diseases. 7,000 diseases that are rare diseases. The treatment for these diseases, whenever they're developed, would be called orphan drugs. For example, there is a disease called Field's condition. Now, this particular disease, so far in the world, only 2 people have been diagnosed with it. Only 2 known individuals suffered from this condition called Field's. So, how are you going to carry out trials for something like this? Numbers are not possible. So, there are diseases like this. There is what is called cystic fibrosis. There is Lou Gehrig's disease. There is Tourette syndrome. You must have seen that movie. Tourette syndrome. This is a rare disease. So these are, when you treat this disease, that is, the treatment is called an orphan drug. Okay, it's practically not possible to have elaborate trials in every country for these diseases. So that's the reason. Now we also have Duncan syndrome, Maldon's, and gigantism. That's also another one. How many people suffer from gigantism? Not many. So these are diseases that are called rare diseases, and the treatment for them is called, the drug that's used to treat them is called an orphan drug. So these are the changes that have been brought in by the country, and this is how, these are the 5 conditions, and this is the new change that has been brought in, and the rule is 101. Now, performance of Ayushman Bharat. Let us look at this. Now, Ayushman Bharat, as we have discussed Ayushman Bharat in great detail in quite a few episodes. Please do look at them if you want to know more about Ayushman Bharat scheme, about the insurance in the Ayushman Bharat scheme, the Ayushman app that is there. We have discussed all those things in great detail in previous episodes. Please take a look at that. This is going to add to that information. Now, this basically, as we have as discussed in the past, it's basically the National Health Policy of 2017. We have launched Ayushman Bharat in the country. It's a flagship scheme of the government, and basically is to have universal health coverage for everybody in the country, and it is to meet the Sustainable Developmental Goal number 3. Remember these things, and which is basically leave no one behind in terms of health coverage, and it provides a continuum approach. So what it does is, we have two parts of this. We have the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is basically a national health insurance scheme. And then we have, which provides a cover of 5 lakhs per year to over 10 crore poor people and vulnerable families, for basically getting secondary and tertiary care. Now, when it comes to primary health, we have health and wellness centers. Earlier, we used to call them primary health centers. Now, we call them health and wellness centers because we've added a few things like yoga and other things to them, giving a more holistic approach to health. Now, these two parts of the program are basically what constitute Ayushman Bharat as a scheme. Now, what are the progress and achievements of the scheme? We have 30 crore cards have been made as of, Ayushman cards have been made as of 2024. And NHA has launched Ayushman app. We've discussed this app in great detail for basically creating Ayushman cards. 4.83 crore Ayushman cards have been made in Uttar Pradesh. UP tops cards. 4.83 crore cards tops the list. Then Madhya Pradesh is at number 2 with 3.78 crore cards. Maharashtra is at number 3 with 2.39 crore cards. Now, 48% of the treatment provided under the scheme has been availed by women. So, gender equality is a core part of the scheme. And Ayushman Bharat has successfully catered to 6.2 crore hospital admissions so far, and it has been worth about 79,000 crore rupees. Okay. Treated 6.2 crore people and worth about 79,000 crores. Now, continuing with the performance. Beneficiaries aged over 70 and above constituted about 12% of all admissions and nearly 14% of the total expenditure till January 2024. Government plans to expand Ayushman Bharat to include all individuals over the age of 70. They have already done this, irrespective of the economic status. Right now, this is a scheme only for poor people, but now what the government has done is, over the age of 70, everybody, irrespective of how much they earn, they are eligible for Ayushman Bharat. Now, the coverage will actually mean increase the policy's utilization and costs, because old people tend to fall, everybody as we age, we tend to fall ill more and we require more medical treatments. Interim budget has increased the scheme extended the scheme to ASHA and Anganwadi workers, but no further expansion was mentioned in the July budget, and the budget has been increased to 7,300 crores. So the current budget will be 7,300 crores. This is the new budget. Okay, so 12%, age 70, 14%. Now, for India's aging population, we have discussed the problem of aging population in India in great detail in the previous episodes. Please take a look at that. And India's aging population by 2050 is going to be 19.5% of the population. That's actually pretty big. We are actually at the height of our demographic dividend right now. And in terms of absolute numbers, by 2050, we are going to triple the number of people who are old, which is like a 300% increase. Now, admission for older populations, older individuals, Maharashtra is leading it with 20.49%. Tamil Nadu recorded the lowest percentage of old people admissions at 3.12%, but had the highest treatment cost for the elderly. States like Maharashtra, Kerala, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh had the highest proportion of spending on elderly care. And treatments basically for elderly are naturally more expensive because they tend to spend more time in ICUs, and there are multiple comorbidities at the same time. Now, extension will cover everybody, like I said, over the age of 70. And benefit another 6 crore elderly people. Basically offers 5 lakhs annual coverage to people, anybody over 70. And if there are 2 senior citizens in a family, they'll be shared, the 5 lakh cover will be shared between them. It doesn't mean 5 plus 5, then the 5 lakh is going to be split between the 2 people. Now, those who are benefiting from other public health schemes like CGHS, EGHS or Ayushman will continue with their current schemes, or they can opt for Ayushman Bharat PMJ. Now, additionally, senior citizens can also continue taking employees' health benefits that might be given by their state governments. Now, to sum this up, these are mostly the performance indicators of Ayushman Bharat, and most of the states are doing quite well. And the biggest change that is going to come in the immediate future is, so anybody over 70 years is going to be given Ayushman Bharat, is going to be given medical cover under the Ayushman Bharat scheme, and 12% of all admissions under the scheme were of the elderly people, and the extension to everybody would mean that 6 crore people would be benefiting from this scheme. Now, these are the actual statistics of the scheme. There have been, as of probably 17/9/24, these are the ABHA card numbers. This is the linked record. These are the registered. There are about 3,34,671 registered health facilities. There are about 4,71,785 healthcare professionals and over 1 million downloads. There are 2,042 active integrators and 235 successful integrators. So this was about Ayushman Bharat, and this is actually going to be, this has been a very useful scheme and much needed in a country like ours. So that sums it up. Thank you. Best of luck with your preparation, and see you again in the next episode.